and welcome to the Go Narrative stream. We are going to be talking about some really fun stuff today. It's great to have you here. We're streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube. If you're a marketer or an entrepreneur who's determined to tell a story that sells, then boy, I've got a treat for you today. We're going to talk about how you can generate demand and accelerate sales pipeline with storytelling. We're going to teach you how to do this without having to learn any specialist, confusing entertainment frameworks. You know what I mean. We won't be teaching you the hero's journey. We won't be talking about the 7 types of story or Kurt Vonnegut's 8 tips or Pixar's tips. You get the point, right? You know that great storytelling can help your business, but it's hard to find time to become a master storyteller and deal with all this stuff. It's not your fault, okay? Most of the storytelling advice that's out there is for entertainment storytelling. You simply don't have the time to become a master storyteller, but you want to be able to benefit from it. So what if I could help you by telling you that there's one single thing you could do that would help with all that? That single thing is business storytelling. So my goal for this presentation is to help 2 types of people. Really, there's the folks who are natural born storytellers. You know who you are. Today, we're actually going to show you how to take your whole company on the storytelling journey, resulting in increased profitability with business storytelling. For those of you utterly new to business storytelling, don't worry, you will get simple frameworks to get going with business storytelling today. In the next 60 minutes, my goal is to get you to believe that business storytelling is the key to unlock unrealized business profitability. I'm going to show you my proprietary frameworks that will make it simple for you to achieve just that result. As a marketer and entrepreneur myself, I know how much frustration there can be in business. For over 20 years in corporate America, I held a variety of marketing roles. I was even chief storyteller for a business division at Microsoft. For years, and even as a passionate storyteller, I struggled to apply storytelling in business. There's so much that you have to manage, right? You might not feel that you've got the time to prioritize storytelling. We're going to change that today. You probably also might feel like you've got to be focusing on all these different marketing channels for fear that if you fail to check all the boxes that you'll fail, or that you have to get on the latest social media platform. You don't have to do all those things. Of course, you have to do some things, but you don't have to do them all. What you need to get right is your business storytelling. Like many of you, I once thought that storytelling was reserved for movies, books, and theater. While I've always appreciated good storytelling, my career was built through science and technology, and I didn't think stories had much to do with those fields at all. However, I did come to learn that storytelling props up everything in business, for every business in every industry. Yes, of course, in communications and marketing, but even more than that, internal alignment, employee motivation, even partnerships. My mother was a scientist, a biologist focused on virology and zoology. She taught my sisters and me to ask questions, develop hypotheses, and test our ideas. We were taught to seek facts, data, truth. She was also, however, a poet and an author. My father reinforced some of this as an electrical engineer who enjoyed a sales and marketing career spanning 5 decades in high tech. He inadvertently indoctrinated me into the world of high tech, Intel specifically. I grew up surrounded by tales of Silicon Valley. In fact, if you're interested in those days, some great stories in the book Accidental Empires. It's a super fun read. We were soaked in story actually from a very early age. Both of my parents read to us voraciously. I still have fond memories of being curled up with Dad and one of my sisters as he read us Lord of the Rings. This is the actual copy, my mum's 1969 edition. It's actually the first time all the Lord of the Rings books were published in one single book. And so I took that passion for science and followed my mother's footsteps into creative writing and my father's footsteps into technology when when I started my career at Intel's marketing department. If any fans of Red Dwarf are in the audience today, you might recognize this person. So this is from a 2002 Intel Counter-Strike gaming event that I helped manage at the Science Museum in London. And yes, that's Lister. In the early days of my career, I thought storytelling was best suited for presentations, for ad campaigns, and for messaging, and it does help with those things. I didn't explicitly see it as being something that could be used across the whole business. Something else I also discovered in those early days was Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, a popular read at Intel. I love how it framed the chasm about how businesses that failed to connect with the early majority would fall into the chasm. It became a sort of North Star for me. If business is about nothing else, it's about connecting your product with the most lucrative of your potential markets, the early majority. Storytelling is about connecting people to ideas. So without realizing it, I was starting to apply storytelling in my everyday work. In one early instance, I created a superhero theme for a partner account training event at Intel. In another, I created a James Bond style sales campaign. That was a lot of fun. Eventually, efforts such as these led to me being internally recruited as chief storyteller for Microsoft Dynamics, just as I was planning on leaving the company. But it was a sweet gig and I was so excited. Oh, wow, I thought, it's official. I'm finally going to get paid for my storytelling. The two science fiction novels that I've at least finished draft 1 on will have to wait for a few more years. So little did I realize that the journey I was about to take would result in me being able to help others unlock a big business secret. It's not about entertainment storytelling at all. Business storytelling may be related to entertainment storytelling, but it's different. And I'm going to share with you why it's different and how to use it. At Intel, a mentor and friend of mine, Nick Drew, once said, always find if someone has done it before. It'll save you time and energy. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel if you can avoid doing so. I've always kept that in mind, and as such, I was looking out for existing approaches that I could leverage in my newly minted chief storyteller role. And I went on the hunt for existing wheels. But honestly, I struggled. I had turned down external job offers to take this role. I had to make it work. Besides, I really wanted to. I discovered that people had been trying to apply storytelling to business as a way to cross the chasm, but there was a problem with how they were approaching it. Now, to be clear, there is some really interesting advice out there about storytelling. For example, I found tons of fascinating information and frameworks born out of hundreds of years of story crafting and literature in the movie industry, like Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. I mentioned that earlier. But in my exploration, I also found useful approaches to help with improving presentations. For example, I absolutely love Nancy Duart's Resonate. And then there was techniques like Bo Eason's for telling your personal story for impact. As I dug into these various methods in classic storytelling models, I couldn't find the wheel that I was looking for. But the available storytelling frameworks themselves had been created for a different goal. And again, that was the goal of entertainment. But we want to use it for business, not just entertainment. Right? So the hero's journey, if you take that, for example, it's like 10, 12, 17 steps. Phrases like rising and falling action, character arc is just too much. It's too much of a heavy lift for you as a busy business and a busy professional. So no matter how many rabbit holes I was exploring and going down, I just couldn't find a storytelling wheel that worked for the repeatable application of storytelling in business. As Chip and Dan Heath explain in their wonderful book, Made to Stick, we're all subject to this thing called the curse of knowledge. This curse makes it hard for people outside of our areas of expertise to understand what we simply get. What is effortless for us requires much energy for a non-expert. Storytelling is no different. When I and others tried to use those entertainment storytelling frameworks in business, the wheels just didn't roll. Maybe I needed to invent a new one after all. But I had a job to do, so I decided to focus on the essence of storytelling. I would use the entertainment frameworks and be a story interpreter. A focus on outside-in customer centricity, a focus on the customer as the hero on their journey to hopefully purchase from us. My team and I created some terrific customer showcase films that focused on the customer and their experience. This reinforced for me how powerful storytelling was, but it also reinforced for me what the issues were. Not all content that we create is a beautiful video. Not all stories have to be big and bold. The power in story structures wasn't just about these big epic stories. I just was discovering more than ever that the power of story wasn't limited to movies and books. Storytelling is how we as humans connect. And since every business is still human to human, for the time being at least, I realized storytelling played an essential role. Externally, in connecting to the customer and partners, internally connecting to individuals and teams and taking everybody on the journey together, running thought experiments, problem solving, and more. I was experiencing storytelling's impact on business, but I felt like I was only just scratching the surface. I wanted to go further than just injecting a few elements of story into traditional marketing approaches. And whilst there is value and use for them, I also wanted to go beyond the big, beautiful, epic stories. I started to wonder what actual business storytelling wheels might look like. I was actually inspired to take my experience outside of my corporate role and start my own company, to put all my energy into helping businesses with storytelling. But I had a young family at home, and my wife was on sabbatical from her career after the birth of our second child. Quitting wasn't an option. Everything changed on July the 19th, 2015. Tragedy struck. My parents were both killed in a car crash. Now, I won't go any further into this sad tale, but the fact that life is short was never more apparent. And unsurprisingly, this was a big turning point in my life. Against this backdrop of profound grief, I left Microsoft. What on earth was I thinking? I tapped into the inner resources I've been gifted by my mother and father, creativity, technology, a love of storytelling, and I honored them in the best way I knew how, helping others, helping you find success in business with the power of storytelling. That's why I formed Go Narrative. I started working on those business storytelling wheels so that you don't have to. Now, whilst it's true I founded Go Narrative as a way to help businesses use the power of storytelling, it's really about helping you be successful, fundamentally successful. So in particular, we love working with technology companies because it's so much complexity that stories can help with. I love technology, and I really want to help amazing technologies invented by great people to flourish. Marketers and entrepreneurs are a creative bunch, and you can create so much with our frameworks. You can create amazing stories, amazing content, and most importantly, authentic, amazing customer engagements. Now, the problem with being driven and creative is that it can result in a little bit of the mix of check every box syndrome with the bright, shiny object syndrome. Trust me, I know the last one particularly well myself. But the truth is, you don't actually need to check every marketing box, including all those latest fancy social media channels. What you need is better storytelling. Remember that big misconception of storytelling? It's not just for children, movies and books, right? It's simply not. Those are just artifacts of what storytelling is really all about. When you apply storytelling in the right way, you're more authentic, your messaging is better, your executives are more relatable, your salespeople have increased confidence, you generate increased demand, you accelerate the sales pipe, and everything is more aligned and has greater integrity. Does that sound pretty good? It does, doesn't it, right? I've seen this power and I wanted to spread the word. But honestly, I found the entertainment frameworks pretty hard to apply in business, and I want to save you that hassle. Because of this, and even after the initial founding of Go Narrative, I did rely on existing frameworks. As I worked to decode storytelling for business, for you, I kept chugging on the concept of delivering our clients what we call a strategic messaging foundation. I did so using my experience creating value propositions, positioning frameworks, messaging frameworks, personas, customer journeys, that kind of stuff, right? Content marketing strategies. Selling these things was great. It was a great start and got our business off the ground. But unlocking business storytelling was still the crown jewel, and I was determined to figure it out. And I have, and I'm sharing that with you today. So remember, literature and film, they found their frameworks in things like the hero's journey, and they found them from years and years of analysis of literature and of movies. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, for example. These things are not storytelling. They are a form of storytelling. And the problem is most people look to them as being the only truth of storytelling when they're not. Storytelling is more than movies and books. I was determined to unlock storytelling for business specifically so that you can use it every day. Storytelling is how we make sense of the world, literally. I mean, do you want your customers to make sense of you? You do, right? So let's do it. But without simple, practical business frameworks, all there was were those entertainment frameworks. So I continued to play this role of interpreter. That's when something really interesting happened. The more I practiced the art and science of storytelling, the more I realized that storytelling is a value problem. And if business is nothing, it's all about value. For our ancestors, the stories of value were told around the campfire. Value is things like which berries were edible, where was the shelter. Evolution did its thing and rewarded with survival the tribes that practiced storytelling. That's literally how it all began. Now, there are a few important things that people get wrong with business storytelling. I discovered 2 cardinal sins. So, sin number 1, what is it? It's not including people and their transformation. This holds true even when the story is short form content, like a tweet or ad copy. I thought back to my time in corporate America. There was this time I was sitting in the crowd of employees. This executive took to the stage. It's like a corporate all hands meeting, right? We have a great story, he called out. The crowd was buzzing. This guy had just been promoted to CMO, and the all hands was his moment. And I'll tell you what it is. The crowd leaned in. What was it? Our products work great together. Our new SKUs and pricing are exactly what our customers need. What? I waited for a story. I kept waiting. Nothing. This was a CMO. Bear that in mind. There was no story. The presentation was not structured around story. There were a few anecdotes sprinkled in. That's it. And this was only one example of where I was seeing the term story being abused. It was a product strategy, a marketing priority, not a story. When you focus on logic and argument, and you basically inspire your audience to argue with you, to push back with you. Stories are about people and the overcoming of obstacles, about that transformation. And this is the why of storytelling. That leads me to the second sin. So what is that second sin? Not including a what? An element of value. It's the whole point of storytelling. It's not just about having fun, telling entertaining things. It's about delivering valuable information. The head and the heart have to be addressed. When you do, your audience can act on a transformation that they see for the very first time simulated in that story that you told them. When we hear a story, we actually simulate those events in our minds. It teaches us how to create similar real-world experiences, and it shows us how our life and business can be better. I love this quote from Jonathan Gottschall. Fiction is an ancient virtual reality machine that specializes in simulating human problems. But as I discovered, it's difficult to apply the entertainment story structures to business. It's a sort of triangle, peg, round hole situation. You might get so far, but far from using it as a repeatable multi-tool for your business every single day. So I continued to play this role of interpreter while focusing on that strategic messaging foundation work. But the dream was real. What if I could forge story frameworks specifically for business people? Wouldn't that be amazing? So my mother's earliest memory was her grandfather taking her and her two sisters down to the smithy. He was a blacksmith, and this was done under pain of death should they tell their mother, my grandmother. He took them down into this hot, smoky environment. He helped them lift up the hammer, crash it down on the hot, hot metal. It was a horseshoe, and then take that and thrust it into the water to temper it, and then back into the flame and back onto the anvil again, and crash, the hammer would come down and sparks would fly everywhere. Forging things takes work. And if I could do the work for you, you wouldn't have to. It was through this experience that I forged these frameworks. I was on a mission to find a way to simplify and unlock storytelling for business, to do so in a way that's accessible. And I've done it. I've unlocked it. I'm so excited to share the frameworks with you today. So I created a set of these tools, these frameworks, to enable business people to find success through storytelling. And here's the kicker: without relying on entertainment frameworks. Simple, accessible, repeatable. Memorizing a bunch of detail can be a heavy lift. It reminds me of my computer science and business administration degree. There was a lot to memorize, like marketing, for example, the 4 Ps, cash cows. To be fair, there was a lot we had to learn. You've probably been in situations where you had to learn a ton and remember a ton yourself, and having to recall all that and apply it, right? So that, amongst all the plates that we're spinning and having to keep them all spinning, every time there's a new channel, Twitter releases a new feature, I get anxious about not jumping on the bandwagon fast enough. For ages, I tried to maintain a Go Narrative Instagram account before I cut my losses and decided to focus on Twitter and LinkedIn. And of course, there's a constant flow of new technologies and new channels, TikTok and Clubhouse, just to name a couple of recent ones. The reality is that no matter the medium, the message needs to use storytelling if it's going to be effective. When I was playing that storyteller, interpreter role to help our clients, I discovered Paul Smith's tools. He didn't create them for a broad application in business, but his wonderful book, Lead with Story, talked about leadership using storytelling. And it had this great framework called the CAR framework: context, action, and results. CAR helped me kind of bridge the mental gymnastics of the entertainment frameworks with business. I liked CAR, but it wasn't quite enough. But I had at least found some kind of story structure that wasn't explicitly tied to entertainment storytelling, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. It did, however, inspire me to forge ahead with crystallizing my process and frameworks. In the end, my realization was quite simple. Stories are like salt. Salt is elemental. Without it, food is bland. Some people even love it on watermelon. I'm not really completely sold on that. It's not as bad as putting pineapple on a pizza. There's 2 types of people in the world, right? But it's kind of interesting, and some people love it. So you want your message to be tasty, right? And stories make everything tastier. I wanted to create a tool as simple as salt, something that anyone could add to their marketing dishes. And you know what? None of these tools, channels, or features matter if they're not tasty, right? Storytelling is an essential element, just like salt. Don't prioritize the channels. Prioritize storytelling, then the channels. Now, some of you are probably thinking, but Matthew, too much salt is a bad thing. Yes, you are absolutely right. And that's exactly why entertainment storytelling structures fail in business. They're too much. There's just too much there. They bring too much salt. So to avoid that, I prioritize focusing on 3 things. Focus on the customer as the hero, if you will, and use personas to guide that. Demonstrate that overcoming of challenges, that the personas or your audience go through, and focus less on products and services. I can't say this enough, and I say it all the time. It's not about you. It's about your customer. It's not about your product. It's not about your service. It's about your customer. Your product or service is a tool that helps them on their journey of overcoming a challenge. If you do nothing else, please immediately start doing this. We use this approach along with my storytelling interpreter role to craft sales presentations, websites, and a whole host of other content. These are some examples. We were also crafting strategic narratives with an early version of our strategic narrative framework. I'm going to share that with you as well today. So I was working on crafting these simple tools for business storytelling as we're going through this process. And we delivered some awesome work, and we still deliver these. These are fantastic. This is our strategic narrative became a part of our strategic messaging foundation in what we have taken to affectionately calling our go-to-market playbook, accompanied by value proposition, positioning frameworks, personas, buyer journeys, and content strategies. I was finally feeding a family of 4 despite having shed the shackles of corporate America. Now, the cool thing about this stuff, personas, positioning frameworks, value propositions, is that they are the business concepts, the business components, if you will, of business storytelling. Our strategic messaging foundation work was ultimately the key that helped me unlock and figure out how to rewrite storytelling for business. When our clients invest in these playbooks, they see real results. A mid-size IT services firm here in the Seattle area saw consistency and unity in all of their efforts across marketing, sales, and their consulting delivery. Their brand tightened up and became very clear. A corporate client of ours saw over 40% increase in registrations for their event series that they were running. Another client saw huge campaign landing page impacts. Inbound search impact went up almost 4x, and the conversions on the pages was over 7x. And that's key. That is essential because you are literally driving people to action through storytelling. And again, the whole point of these frameworks is to be useful tools that we can use with anyone, that you can use, right? They have to be useful. They have to be simple. And by using them, our clients are making their products and services stand out, to make what they do and say interesting. I love helping our clients find that better way to clarity and to connect with their customers. And I find it all through storytelling. And it's really no surprise. Our brains are wired for it, right? Our society is built on it. And it's a multi-tool. The good news is you don't need every single latest social media channel to find success. Whatever platform you're using, you can use storytelling to make it better, to make it tastier. And it's that secret that I'm about to share. In fact, it's 3 secrets. That's right. So one false belief that we hear is that storytelling may be a powerful way to communicate. It may be entertaining, but it's really just too hard to apply. Every time I try and use a hero's journey in my marketing, it's just too complicated, too much lift. I have too much to worry about already. That leads us to secret number 1. Quick and easy story hack to increase profitability without learning all of the nuances of entertainment storytelling. So another false belief that we often hear is, okay, I'm sold on storytelling. I understand the framework, but I still can't create stories that work. They're missing something. They don't have a heart. I have so many product benefits to get across. I can't really fit in the right emotions or figure out the right emotions that I should include. What emotions? Happiness, sadness? How do I figure all this stuff out? Hence, secret number 2, a way to build and tell confident business stories that connect with the hearts and the minds of your customers. There's another false belief that we hear. Okay, I get it. I understand those frameworks, but you know what? I'm just struggling to get the internal support. Maybe I don't have the political clout. I need this funding. If I need the budget, if I'm going to move forward with this storytelling effort internally. And I just can't show how storytelling or narrative connects to the business, or how all our stories connect together so that all those horses are pulling the wagon in one direction. And that leads us to secret number 3, telling the right story to connect your audience to your product and move them to act in a way that is deeply aligned to your business. So that's our third framework. Let's talk about secret number 1. Okay. Take out your pen and paper, take some notes, and you're going to want to jot stuff down as we go through this one. So remember, I mentioned how I try and avoid reinventing the wheel wherever possible. There's tons of fascinating stuff about storytelling that's out there, but I just was looking for one that was for business, right? And there's all this stuff based on literature and all this jazz, right? But again, it's for entertainment, and we're like, no, not entertainment storytelling, business storytelling. What does that look like, right? And business storytelling, I just couldn't find any how-tos for applying it in business and marketing in a repeatable manner, because that's the whole thing about business, right? You need to keep doing things again and again and again if you're going to be successful. And I just couldn't find the wheel for the job. And so I was looking at the hero's journey. I was thinking about Chip and Dan Heath and their, how we as experts get it and others don't. I was like, how can I simplify this so you can get it? Because I've spent so long in it myself. So these are all North Stars for me. But I knew if I could forge a salt simple framework that I could use it in our work, and also I could provide it to you. But forging frameworks can be tricky, right? Turns out that I had really great experience, very lucky experience that I had at Microsoft. I have a patent. I have a Microsoft patent that developed along with Fred Studer and Kelly Rigotti, Customer Engagement Accelerator. A patent's pretty interesting to create. It's not easy. You have to be very detailed in the flow of information, the technical details, process, how things are processed, inputs, outputs, storing data, amongst other things, right? And so we were going through this process, and it was proving really tricky. So I turned to my storytelling filters, and I used storytelling, and I put that filter on, and I thought about it from our customer perspective, from the user's perspective, and I thought about them as the hero, and everything became clear. And that also started to teach me that this isn't just about entertainment, right? This is about using story as a practical tool in business. It really helped me crystallize that SALT simple framework and unlock the true power of simple business story structures. Now, the good news is, whilst all this legwork's been done, the good news is you don't have to go through all those walls that I've been through, right? Because I've done all this work for you. And you can just pick up these frameworks and start applying them. And the thing is, there's a couple aspects that I didn't want to lose from the entertainment frameworks. I wanted to retain the interest and the excitement. I didn't want it to be completely cold. It had to be interesting. Otherwise, it wouldn't be engaging. And I also wanted to create frameworks that weren't just about the messaging, right? Like I said about the patent, I also wanted to create frameworks that were about how we solve business problems strategically. And I truly believe that frameworks can be really empowering, that they provide guardrails, and you can take your storytelling destiny into your own hands, even if you don't think you're a natural born storyteller, because we've created these guardrails for you, these simple, practical frameworks that help in applying this. And so where we live in Seattle, we're surrounded by water, right? We fantasize about living on an island. We saw this house go on sale, so we packed the kids in the ferry, popped over. And we went to go look at this house. It was a new house, but the foundation it just was not good, right? We could tell there was problems. We ended up running away from it, right? My parents had a 450-year-old farmhouse, so I knew that houses could last a long time if they had a solid foundation and good bones. But this one on the island was absolutely terrible. Again, and it reminded me how important a foundation is, right? How important the framework is, because the framework is that foundation. And we needed to make sure our frameworks had a great foundation, that they were simple and easy to use. Crikey, there's a story there with light switches. If you have a light switch that's too complicated, you're not going to use it. Internet of Things, right? You have all these potential fancy light switches. If you go that route, make sure you get one that can just be used like an old-fashioned light switch, right? It has to be a simple tool, has to be able to be used practically, repeatedly every single day. And if you get your storytelling frameworks right, you don't need to worry as much about the channels that you're going through. The right frameworks can really help you get attention, be heard, and ultimately drive action, because that's what storytelling is all about. You can use it for internal alignment, pitching your ideas to your boss, exploring your product strategy, crafting product positioning, defining a strategic narrative for your business. You can do all of these things. And of course, campaigns and messaging, right? When you get that foundation right, you go beyond just the telling. And Campbell and Snyder wanted to help authors and filmmakers craft stories, right? I want to help you do it with business, storytelling for business, to craft your unique business. Your craft is that. It's not storytelling, right? And so that's what we've done. We've created this so you can use it, so you can focus on your craft. Even natural born storytellers can benefit from structures designed for business that help with practical application. And to be brutally honest, I know that from a focus group of one for starters, because I love storytelling. Like I said, I've written 2 science fiction novels. I bleed story, right? Yeah, I use our frameworks all the time because it helps me keep the guardrails. It helps me make sure I've got the right pieces inside. And, ultimately, we should all be able to enjoy living in a beautiful house without worrying about the foundation, safe in the knowledge that it's well built. By the way, that house on Vashon Island sold for 20% less when everything in the market was actually getting bid up. So it goes to show you how important a strong foundation is. Okay, are you ready for it? That storytelling framework that I've promised you. You've been very patient so far. So here it is. This is our first framework. The 3D story framework is practical and straightforward. It helps you see your story from all angles. Nike's Just Do It inspired me. They pack so much into 3 words, all that important stuff in a way that represents what they're communicating. And it represents so much more than those 3 words. And it presses all those buttons in your brain, your storytelling brain. So the 3D stand for desire, difficulty, denouement. Fancy French word. I'll get to that in a second. In a nutshell, people, your audience, want something. But life is never easy. Something stands in the way. That's the difficulty. And then I chose the fancy French word denouement because it means the untangling of the knot. What a wonderful metaphor, right? How was it untangled? With what? Was a specific approach or product or service? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, your product and service, right? Was that used to help unravel it? Seriously, go and practice this tonight. Tell a story to your spouse, a loved one, a friend, a child, any story, something that's happened in your day to day, and use the 3D framework. What did you want? What stood in your way? How did you untangle that knot? Desire, difficulty, denouement. In my story journey, I knew the importance of contrast, of change, of transformation. And I knew that every business decision, big or small, is ultimately about transformation. And if people can easily understand the why and the how of another solution to such a transformation, they can be persuaded to follow the same path. And that is the magic of storytelling, like Jonathan Gottschall said about simulating human problems. And that ultimately is a path to purchase from you. So we designed our 3D story framework to be deceptively simple, a rich microcosm of nuances, details, and context packed into it, just like Nike's Just Do It slogan tagline. So from all those years as a story interpreter for business, I knew that if you pulled on the correct threads, you'd extract what was needed to construct a story. Now you can actually go even deeper than these 3Ds, but it's the best place to start. A good story puts you in the center, and those 3 words do just that. And they tease at that transformation, all in a way that helps you see every single detail and to view it from different perspectives. It should come as no surprise that we use our 3D story framework every single day in our marketing, in our sales conversations, to better understand our prospective clients. For our clients, we use it for many things. Here is an example of a landing page above the fold copy that utilizes our 3D framework. We also use it as a tool to break down value propositions based on real customer stories in our workshops, to create train the trainer guides with an outside in perspective, and to coach our clients on how to quickly and easily tell stories without the baggage of entertainment story frameworks, which is magic, right? Now, whilst it may be true that we're all natural born storytellers, it's also true that it's different to spin a yarn about your day than it is to craft a strategic narrative for an energy compliance company. The latter is a little bit harder. I love this quote from Ben Horowitz. Storytelling is important, and yes, it takes work, But we've taken some of that work out of this for you by creating these frameworks. Now, do you have to spend a bit of time and energy on it? Yes. And the more of this you do yourself, the more of this you lift yourself, of course, the more work you have to do. But you can get going with it. This makes it a little bit easier. And come on, who doesn't want a hack, right, on how to do something better and easier? We're staining a fence right now. The first thing we did was hop on YouTube and go and check out some videos about the best practices of doing that. Everybody loves hacks. So with the 3D framework, you've got this easy on-ramp to understanding and applying storytelling. And I'm excited for its simplicity because that means it's easier for you to remember and practice it and start using it. Practice immediately. Start tonight. We finally found a way to make using storytelling more accessible to you as a business person. And that makes me really, really happy. Okay, great. So you got your story structure down. You're starting to riff out some stories. Stories need emotion. We have to feel a story. Remember earlier when I told you about the framework we developed to help us infuse emotions into storytelling? We're going to get to that. That's our next framework. So this might all be sounding good and you're thinking, okay, that's great, but how do I really connect? How do I really move them to buy my audience? So we hear this thing from folks about, the power of, they get the power of storytelling, but they're trying to figure out how to inject emotions. I mentioned that earlier, but it's just too much, right? Help me. And it's why so many business people struggle with storytelling and ultimately why so many of you give up, because it doesn't work. It doesn't have the emotional punch. And I don't want you to give up on storytelling because I know how powerful it is. Now, I experienced this in my storytelling interpreter role, right? I was worried that the stories I crafted weren't having the sort of impact that we needed. When I delivered our very first strategic narrative, I was in pins and needles. What would they think of the narrative metaphor that I had chosen on an eagle soaring above the landscape of the big picture that the CEO it was very much a part of her very fiber of her being? Would all that crafted to engage emotionally, would it fall flat? Thankfully, they loved it. So getting to that emotionally resonant place can be hard and does take work. So it helps if we have tools to help out. I was really lucky in my grandmother's, in her twilight years, she actually lived in the same village as my parents. And so when I would visit from university, I'd get to hang out with her and spend some time with her. And I was back one time chatting with her, and I was talking about how I was struggling at university. Maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's dyslexia, maybe it's my bright shiny object syndrome. Either way, I was stopped by my grand's one day on a day back from university for a cup of tea. Ain't no party like my nana's tea party. Some of you might get this Flight of the Conchords reference. Matthew, she said, if degrees were easy, they would just hand them out after A-levels. A-levels are the equivalent of high school in the UK, if you will. So she was right, though. It made me think of my mother's forge story. And no, I didn't spill the beans, even in those later years, about my mother's trip to the smithy. But I kept my grand's comments in mind. Nothing worth working for is a handout. But if I could do the hard work, if I could figure out how to unlock the emotional side of storytelling for business people, that would be a huge win, right? Because emotions are bigger and more detailed, more important than just happiness and sadness. They can be quite complicated. So it helps to have something that's going to send you in the right direction, right? And so that's exactly what we started working on, right? And the entertainment structures kind of achieve this in a certain way, but as we've covered, you don't want to be using those because they're just too big, too complicated. Now, there's a problem with complex, detailed structures, right? And it can hamper creativity if you struggle to learn it and check all the boxes. And if you're not used to those entertainment frameworks, and you shouldn't have to be, when you're consumed by learning the framework, it distracts and detracts from something critical to storytelling, and that's getting the right emotions in. You're trying to check all the boxes, and you end up not checking some of the really important ones. So as actually all this crystallized for me. We were doing it implicitly, but it all crystallized in the early days of COVID. The importance of the right emotions in the stories. Like I said, not all emotions are created equal. And in those early days, I was doing my best with everyone to keep calm and carry on. And I was on the hunt to ensure that we respected the intense emotional landscape of the time, because emotions affect everything, right? So, for example, our family loves Star Wars, right? Originals, prequels, don't hate me, sequels, toys. We've had more Star Wars Lego than you can shake a stick at. I've even met George Lucas twice, but that's another story. Ask me about it. I'm happy to share. I remember reading an article about the lightsaber battles in Star Wars and how the actors had to practice, right? Because for many of them, they'd never done sword fighting before. It was a new experience. Each actor brought their own inimitable style to the swordplay. It wasn't just parry, block, and slice. There was art and emotion to it, and each character was different. Christopher Lee played the character of Count Dooku in the prequels. Swordplay wasn't new for Christopher Lee. He'd actually been sword fighting roles before many of us were born. Here he is in 1973's classic The Three Musketeers. So in his case, his classic, elegant style was integrated into his Star Wars character. To breathe life into a story, you must infuse that technique and science with character, art, and emotion. Just like Christopher Lee breathed life into Count Dooku's lightsaber battling style. The place to start with this is by asking what truths the transformation or change in the world is forcing on your customers. The good news is I've created a way for you to quickly add emotion to your stories. Better yet, you don't have to be a creative literary genius or award-winning director or screenwriter to do so. It's called the Story Meet Method. You can put this framework and use it to infuse emotion into any story and meet your customers where they are, and not just rationally, but emotionally too. Okay, are you ready for it? Drum roll, please. If you understand what moves people, you can craft things that result in action. And the emotions are key to that. So with Meet, you don't need to maintain all the steps of the hero's journey to create the right emotional response. This simple hack is three parts. So morals, your customer's perspective, right? On the good, the bad, and the indifferent, right? So that is a kind of the sort of the moral direction, if you will, right? The moral filter. Then there's the emotions or essential emotions, right? The feelings that exist for your audience around the topic. And then there's truths, concepts that the audience holds dear and central to their decision-making, regardless of whatever that topic is. It's really your iceberg hack to bring emotions into your business stories. And what it actually enables is a quick way to connect all the things that people care about in business, right? Care, that's a key word here. Care, emotion, right? It's not all speeds and feeds, facts and figures, features and benefits, right? Human beings are still involved in this process. And not all emotions are created equal. Sadness, happiness, not specific enough, right? You must look at the context of your audience. Morals shape and guide businesses' culture, office locations, affiliations, donations, even collaboration culture within the company is affected by the moral makeup of that company. Essential emotions ooze out of all interactions in business. Elation for success, fear for career snafus, had some of those in my time, excitement for ideation and collaboration and winning the big deal. Truths frame up a business. Things are just a certain way sometimes. This can be affected by the industry, the founders, the country of origin, where the headquarters is, and so on. But just start pulling the thread with the Story Meet method, and you will start to unravel the complex cardigan of emotions in no time. Okay, so getting emotions right in your storytelling builds empathy. That creates the conditions for engagement. And I'm so excited to share this simple framework because it now means you can unlock those emotions in your business storytelling. And there's honestly no greater feeling of success than when we impact people's lives and they end up saying things like Hannah from And Plus said to us. This is the sort of quote that we live for, okay? Now, remember earlier when I told you about the framework we developed to create that deep alignment to the business, create alignment for all your stories, help you get your storytelling initiatives off the ground, help you just win internally using storytelling internally, right? So we're going to go into that one now. So it was about that time I started to look for, I was looking at all the different frameworks and I was trying to figure out how to do it in business. And I also realized the importance and the power of storytelling the thing is that, so for example, go and do a quick Google storytelling. You could, I don't know, just basically type in storytelling, right? Google storytelling, hit I'm lucky, right? See what pops up. And I was struggling to find anything about the why of storytelling or even how to apply it, right? So when you do that, when you search for it and you hit I'm lucky, you'll probably find this HubSpot article. Now, not to throw HubSpot under the bus, fantastic content marketers, loads of great content. The article is actually not a bad article. However, you will, when you read it later, you'll notice a few things. Not only is it not structured around a story, there also isn't a story to be seen anywhere in it. Now, that's kind of okay if you're deep down into your decision-making process and you're trying to figure this stuff out and you're trying to learn storytelling, right? But not if you're trying to actually sell somebody on storytelling or sell somebody on anything at all. And I'm sure you've all realized by now why I've gone on this mission, right? Is to make it easier and to allow companies, even HubSpot in this case, to infuse storytelling into their content. The power of story, look, it goes far, far beyond the content of storytelling. We can use it to shape the world. I remember back in 2017 when I sat with my wife on the sofa and we talked about what to call the company. I landed on Go Narrative for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I wanted to convey action, achievement. That's the word go. But the reason why I chose the word narrative was because of the way that you have lots of stories that all ultimately align together and accrue up to this thing called a narrative. And storytelling isn't just about storytelling, right? We use it to help our clients build authenticity into everything they say and do. It's so far beyond just storytelling, and that's why narrative is so important. And that's why I chose that second word. It's about the big picture. For example, your favorite movie includes actually a collection of stories that all accrue up to the overall narrative of the film. But I had two fundamental questions. Firstly, how do we create authenticity by tying all those stories together with a golden thread? Which led me to an even more profound question. How do we ensure that all the stories that we tell are the correct stories that matter for the business and drive action in the business, whilst also feeding authenticity? So I hope you're starting to see that business has different demands on storytelling than movies and books, and therefore business needs different frameworks. In the early days of solving the business storytelling problem, I was hooked, right? I went really deep. I geeked out. You might recall how I kept running into problems trying to get the business to benefit from storytelling. I remember going to my general manager and trying to go through the hero's journey. Didn't go well. I don't recommend it. Most people are just simply too busy, right, to take on this extra workload if they're not specializing in it. But it's a tool that everybody should be able to benefit from, right? And that's what I want you to be able to do, even though many other people can't because they're trying entertainment frameworks. If you follow our frameworks, you will immediately be able to start applying it. And so that's just the storytelling part, right? But what about narrative? What about tying it all together? How do I even get started with this? This is starting to sound a bit complicated. I kind of got the basic frameworks. I got the emotional stuff, but this is starting to sound a bit intimidating, right? So this is where the paradox of storytelling really manifests, right? The paradox is simple truth that storytelling isn't just storytelling. And if you focus on the storytelling, you won't get the most out of story structures. And the driving force that results in the telling of stories is how our brain works and precisely how it works in relation to society. I love how Will Storr talks about getting along and getting ahead, and how he talks about the storytelling brain and the role that it plays in that. But the paradox doesn't end there. Remember, even with something as natural as simple as salt that we use every day, it's possible to use too much or to knock it over. It's tricky to apply in business and use the right amount of salt. And in most cases, folks will just dabble and sprinkle a little bit of story into some presentations or content or maybe an ad. I love how Mike Maddox likes, you can't see the label from inside the jar. I want to help you get out of the jar. See the big picture. Think of your favorite movie again. Multiple stories all woven together to the narrative of the film. And there's normally a moral or a metaphor that encapsulates it all. But when you first watched that movie, you didn't know that. You were in the jar, consuming each story as it was served up to you. In The Wizard of Oz, which I showed to the kids recently, the narrative is one that one's true purpose is found within oneself. There's no place like home, Dorothy famously says, and it turns out that she was there all along. And the stories of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion all support that narrative. They all accrue and feed up into it. They had what they sought all along. Think of a brick wall. Now, imagine that wall not as multiple bricks, but as a single piece of tall, thin, fired clay. Such a wall is never built. Why? It's weak. When you have multiple bricks connected by mortar, it's strong. It's to do with how the forces act brick to brick, and that ultimately enhances its strength. So a narrative is kind of like metaphor. It holds all those stories together, and together they're stronger, they're more robust. What makes up this mortar? Well, in business, when you're prospecting for the insights to feed into your narrative, you need to extract story insights from employees, customers, partners, the founders, and you need to look at the context these stories were happening in. The changing world, the trends, the facts, the hopes, the dreams, the potential outcomes, the transformation going on in the world, the pressure that this exerts on people, how they navigate that change to get to success. These are the raw materials for themes and connections that inform a strategic narrative. Remember, this is more than just about storytelling. And this is the problem with the paradox. People see it just for entertainment. It's why most people only get so far as learning how to apply storytelling to presentations. They don't see it as something deeply connected to the business. What if you had a way to guide your leadership team through the narrative elements in a language they understood and deeply connected that to the business, and to help the whole business benefit from the power of story structures? That's what I was able to uncover, a way to create a strategic narrative rooted in the business. Again, not only without having to memorize any of these entertainment frameworks. No hero's journey, remember? But ultimately, so that you could get more out of storytelling for business than just presentations, than just messaging, because that's what this is all about. More, you can get more. So you might be familiar with this quote, any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic. That's what this framework felt like for me when I finally encoded it. It was not only bringing consistency and authenticity to the stories that our clients told, it was actually able to shape the business itself. And there really is a magical business feeling in that authenticity and alignment with our narrative frameworks and what they bring. But it was even better than that. We were able to use this narrative framework as a sort of X-ray to see inside of a business from the outside in. For someone who'd been championing customers and outside in thinking for decades, it made a lot of sense to me. If you could see the business and break it down into a framework that was rooted in storytelling, you would have the tool to create a narrative for business. And there is a secret that ties all of this together. The fact is, your company's strategy is deeply linked to your story. I love this Ben Horowitz quote. In good companies, the story and the strategy are the same thing. He goes on to say that the output of all the work and everything a company does is the story. It's story making, and we're doing it. Every business, every individual is doing it every single day. But are you doing it intentionally? A strategy without a story is an incomplete strategy. Is your strategy complete? Okay, are you ready for it? I am. So here it is. Here it is. Am I getting a bit click happy? Okay. So with the TRIP storytelling methodology, we can ensure all those stories that you tell have a common foundation, but are also deeply connected to the business. TRIPS is an acronym. So what does it stand for? T stands for transformation. What change is going on in the world? How is that affecting companies, governments, people? How is that affecting your customer? This is the why that you're embarking on this mission in the first place. It's why you invented what you invented. It's why you're developing that new business plan or crafting that new marketing campaign. R is reasons to believe. There's a head and a heart to this. What are the market facts and trends that support and provide evidence of the transformation? And that's key. But they're also not disconnected from the other important aspect of reason to believe, and that is the aspiration, the inspiration that your customers seek. What do they want to achieve, right? What's the reason for doing this for them? I is innovation. It's what you bring to the table. It's your secret sauce. So it could be a product, it could be a transformation winning tool. It could be like Amazon, it's customer service, right? It doesn't have to be an actual product. Something that's very special about you, something you have forged forward on, something that's unique, dare I say, differentiated. P is for problems that the transformation imposes, problems getting going with a solution, problems that must be overcome along the way to achieve that transformation. And S is stories, stories that articulate all this, stories about the transformation, stories about your innovation, the founder's story, for example. Look for stories and use the 3D story framework to do that. So all of this can happen. It can happen naturally, implicitly. But of course, when you do that without an approach, you are rolling the dice. In some ways, I didn't even invent this stuff. I kind of uncovered it, right? Because it's really kind of a natural law based on how our brain works. And Joseph Campbell reverse engineered millennia of literature. I was able to stand on his shoulders, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And through the strategic messaging foundation work, I was then able to decode storytelling for business so that I could then codify it as these repeatable tools. And as I said, this can happen naturally, but don't just roll the dice. You don't have to. You no longer have to cross your fingers and pray that because now you have the secret to doing it every time, okay? When you craft narratives with the TRIP storytelling methodology, you will frame your strategy for transformation and how it relates to your market, and you will harvest the proper inputs for your stories. You'll have a golden thread that ties everything together. Then, with our 3D story framework, create stories that connect to your narrative consistently, repeatedly. And with the story meet framework, story meet method, you can find the right emotions every time when you create those stories and infuse them with emotions that get people to act. The TRIP storytelling framework is our North Star of outside in focus for consistency, for repeatability. In our business, we use this internally and externally. Internally, we use it to shape our own narrative and guide the work that we do for our clients. Externally, we use it to diagnose a new client, craft our materials and coaching sessions with them, provide the baseline for creating their strategic narrative. Like I said, it's an X-ray to see inside their business. For example, we'll run a workshop with a client to extract all their inputs for each of the TRIPS elements. We have a virtual version of this workshop too. Then we'll test, research, and expand on those concepts. We use this to identify cultural and meta-narratives that can then be used as narrative metaphors to accelerate understanding and get people to where you want them to be. These narrative metaphors, along with that foundation and story work based on the 3D story, are then used to craft the strategic narrative. Our customers have achieved things like that 40% increase in registrations when they pursue this approach. This is our golden thread, or to go back to that wonderful story that my father was reading to us on the couch all those years ago. It's our one ring to bind it all. After we applied our frameworks, we saw deal sizes 10x the size. These engagements included multiple of our storytelling services. Importantly, of course, the strategic narrative. And I'm thrilled. My journey with storytelling went from entertainment stories, hero's journey stuff, to brain science, the cogs of society, how we interact together. And I learned that storytelling wasn't just to do with the telling of stories or even just a way of being interesting and engaging. I learned that there is a process that is fundamentally linked to how our brains work, how we see the world, how we communicate, and even the problem solving on which we embark. It fuels our lives and the businesses that we run. I also learned how to align a narrative to the business and to create a strategic narrative that connects to a human understanding of the world as a bridge to your product or service. And I learned how to use these narratives to intentionally create stories that align and inspire people to act. Now, you have the secret to unlock storytelling success for business. You'll create energy and interest for your program, your campaign, your storytelling initiative itself. You will build alignment and get people on board. It's on that energy that you can then engineer large-scale, meaningful narratives and campaigns that convert and trigger the right mix of hormone release at scale. This is storytelling for action. So let me ask you a question. If you followed everything I've gone through today, the secrets in secret number 1 with the story structures, secret number 2, the framework for extracting emotions and putting the right emotions in stories, and secret number 3 for aligning your storytelling to your business and aligning all those stories together, do you think if you did all those things, you could drive more demand and accelerate your sales pipeline and get the support you need internally? How many of you are feeling excited right now? Maybe a better question might be, how many of you feel a little overwhelmed, drinking from the fire hose, right? I get it. It's impossible to cover everything in a 60-minute presentation, but I really do hope you've taken something away from this. I had some presentation coaching one time, and basically he said, look, you know your topic, you know your subject, you know your product, you know your company. You're up there for an hour. You're only going to be able to communicate so much. What you really need to do is play this role as the guide and help people take the next stage on the journey. Today, you have that next stage on the journey. You've got our 3 frameworks that you can start using immediately, but then there's also something else, and that is storytelling for action, and it's why we're launching this program. I'm so excited for this program. We have taken the detail level that goes behind everything I've talked about today, and we have put together over 100 pages of playbook. And that 100 pages of playbook, also a training that leads you through, an online training that leads you through that so you can understand it. We've got a forum to take so you can ask us questions. We've got additional templates so you can take your team on the journey. We're even including a bonus customer showcase program. Basically, how do you create the right case studies, customer reference, and customer showcase work for your company as a bonus? I'm so excited for this. So excited. I'm going to take a few minutes to ask any questions, but I hopefully you'll sign up. I'll just before I go into the Q&A, just so you can see, gonarrative.com/SFA. Go there, sign up. You'll get access as soon as we release it. We're releasing this very, very soon. And you will also get a bonus, which is you will get our regular weekly newsletter where we send out storytelling tips, business storytelling tips that you can use every single week. So you have those ideas sitting in your inbox. Okay, so questions. I'll stick around for a few minutes here. If you don't have any now, pop back next week. We do run this every week. Normally, we've been running it in the mornings. We're running it this afternoon today. Let us know if you have a preference. Turn up, ask questions, or shoot us an email as well. I've got the email on the final slide, but gnhelp@gonarrative.com. So let's have a look at some of the questions that are coming in here. So let's see. Okay. What is the biggest mistake people make with storytelling? Well, business people, okay. So there's really 2. One is not understanding it enough to use it effectively, like the CMO example, right? And that's why I've got a problem with people saying something's a story when it's not. It's like saying, hey, check out my Ferrari. You have to come look at my Ferrari. It's a really nice Ferrari. And then they go look at your Honda Civic, right? Words matter. Sorry, but they do. Is why people don't swear in business as well. So don't say story if it's not a story, okay? Please stop doing that. That's the first egregious thing. And the second big problem people have, entertainment story structures. Seriously, unless you actually want to learn the details of how to create a novel, how to create a script, how to create that type of entertainment story, which those have been designed for. And remember, they were reverse engineered years of millennia of successful literature and more recently movies. They reverse engineered that stuff, right? Because that stuff, those stories came about naturally because of our brains, how our brains work, how society works. So that's the second one, using entertainment story structures. Good news for you is you don't have to do that anymore because we've given you our 3D, our meat, and our trips frameworks today. Okay, let's see what other questions we have here. Why? So you sure mentioned movies and films a lot for someone who says businesses don't need that approach. Yeah, but it's kind of the point, right? I'm talking about it because you know what it is, and I'm using that as a bridge to get you to understand that there's something better, significantly better. Yeah, and there's some good analogies in there, right? There are some good analogies, like that Wizard of Oz example, right? Thinking about a movie, your favorite movie, you understand these things. You can think to that. You can think about the Wizard of Oz. You understand, the lion wanted courage. The Tin Man wanted a heart, and the Scarecrow wanted a brain. Well, through the book and the movie, right, the lion was brave. He had courage. He's the one that helped them get away from the monkeys, the flying monkeys, I think. You've got the Tin Man is constantly expressing care and empathy for those around him, and the Scarecrow is solving problems, right? They had it all along, right? So that's something it's a shortcut to understanding. It's a metaphor. So when I talk about films and movies and books, I'm using those as a metaphor for storytelling, but you don't need to use the structures of those things, because you've now got business story structures, because we've created them for you and you don't have to do it yourself. Great question though. Okay. This is kind of related. So what do I need to remember about all the story arcs, hero's journey? And I've heard about this darkest cave. What about that? You don't. Okay. Put all that to the side. If you feel like geeking out on it, I'm not going to stop you. I spent the best part of a decade doing that. However, put those to the side, pull out the 3D framework. You don't even need to use the word hero. In fact, I would encourage you not to. Think about your audience, think about your customer, think about your prospect. That's how you should be thinking about this. And that's going to get you a lot further than thinking about Obi-Wan Kenobi example of the hero's journey and Luke's transition from a farm boy into a hero that saves the galaxy. Okay, right. Okay. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Yeah. So why don't you have heroes or things like, it's like I just said, why don't you have heroes or things like that in your frameworks? They are embedded. We encourage you to think about them in business terms, of course, like I said about audience, but the aspects of story are embedded in there. They're connected to how our brains work. Desire, difficulty, denouement. That's it. It's simple. It makes sense. And within each one of those, to answer the questions for those, you have to get more information. So desire, who had the desire? Where were they? What were they doing, right? So this starts to bring the context in. Remember Paul Smith, context, action, results, right? Some people start by saying that. Let's think about the context first. It's very quickly and very easily you can start to have frameworks that get bloated, right? And so we wanted to keep it simple. But if you use that, you can start pulling at the thread and start exploring it. And that's why we've created it, to do that. Okay. Thank you so much. We will be back next week. And I would also love it if you have questions, if you want to have a conversation. But of course, I would also love you to go and sign up to get the announcement for when we release Storytelling for Action. So excited. It's literally the entire roadmap that you need to apply storytelling in your business. It's what we use in our consulting practice to help our clients. It's literally the approach. We've taken all that IP and we have packed it into this thing, and we're giving it to you for an absolute steal. So go and sign up for that. Super exciting. Can't wait to hear from you. Have a great rest of your day. Happy storytelling. And remember, go tell a story tonight using the 3D framework. Desire, difficulty, denouement. And if you forget, go up and speak to our bot on our website, and you can actually get a little refresher on there as well. Okay, take care. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Bye for now.